The Winchester rifle felt heavier than usual in Violet Warren's hands as she watched the three dust-covered men ride away from her homestead, their laughter still echoing across the prairie as they disappeared into the Arizona heat. They had come demanding payment for protection she neither wanted nor needed, and she had sent them away with words sharp enough to match the blade she kept tucked in her boot. It was 1878, and Ruby City, Arizona, was barely holding on to civilization by its fingernails. "Aunt Violet, are they gone?" The small voice came from behind the weathered door of their modest ranch house, and Violet turned to see 8-year-old Emma peeking out, her blonde braids coming loose from their ribbons. "They are, sweetheart. Come on out now." Violet leaned the rifle against the porch railing and opened her arms. Emma rushed into them, followed by her younger brother, 6-year-old Thomas, who tried to look brave despite the fear still lingering in his blue eyes. "Were they bad men?" Thomas asked, his small hand gripping the toy horse Violet had carved for him last winter. "Just men who think women alone are easy targets," Violet said, smoothing his dark hair. "But we are not easy targets, are we?" "No, madam," both children chorused, though Emma's voice wavered slightly. Violet looked out across the land her sister and brother-in-law had worked so hard to establish. Margaret and Samuel had built this place from nothing, dreaming of raising their children under the wide Arizona sky. Then cholera had swept through Ruby City 18 months ago, taking both of them within days of each other. At 24 years old, Violet had found herself sole guardian to 2 children, responsible for a ranch, and suddenly very alone in a territory that did not look kindly on women trying to make their own way. The youngest child, 3-year-old Sarah, toddled out onto the porch, her dark curls bouncing as she reached for Violet's skirt. "Hungry, Auntie?" "I know, little one. Let's get some lunch ready." Violet scooped Sarah into her arms and ushered the older children inside. The house was simple but sturdy. 2 bedrooms and a main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. Violet had given the children the larger bedroom, while she made do with a small space barely big enough for her narrow bed and a trunk containing her few possessions. As she prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Violet's mind worked through their problems. The cattle needed tending, several fence posts needed replacing, and the well was getting harder to draw water from each day. She could handle most of the work herself, had been handling it, but there were only so many hours in a day, and she refused to neglect the children who depended on her. Margaret had been the only family Violet had after their parents died of fever back in Missouri. When Margaret had written about the opportunities in Arizona Territory, Violet had been teaching at a small schoolhouse and dreaming of adventures she would never have. After Margaret's death, Violet had discovered that her sister had left detailed journals about running the ranch, almost as if she had known she would not be there to teach Violet herself. "Aunt Violet, can we go see the horses after lunch?" Emma asked, her fear from earlier already fading. "Children were resilient that way. We will see. I need to check on the south pasture first." Violet set plates in front of the children and settled Sarah in the high chair Samuel had built. The little girl immediately began picking at her food with her fingers, making happy sounds. A knock at the door made Violet freeze. The rifle was still outside on the porch. She moved toward the door carefully, motioning for Emma to take Thomas and Sarah to the bedroom. But Emma's hand trembled as she reached for Thomas, and Violet softened her voice. "It is probably just Mrs. Henderson from town. She mentioned bringing by some preserves, but it was not Mrs. Henderson." When Violet opened the door, she found herself looking up at a tall man in dust-covered clothing, his dark hair curling slightly beneath a worn hat. He had the look of someone who spent his life outdoors, with sun-weathered skin and lines around eyes that were a striking shade of green. He held his hat in his hands, a gesture of respect that immediately set him apart from the men who had visited earlier. "Madam, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Kieran Xander. I am looking for work, and I heard in town that you might be needing help here on your ranch." Violet studied him carefully. He stood easily 6 feet tall, lean but clearly strong, probably in his late 20s. His clothes were worn but clean, and he met her eyes directly without the challenging stare some men used when dealing with women. Still, she had learned to be cautious. "Who told you I needed help?" "The storekeeper, Mr. Chen. He mentioned you had been trying to manage a loan since your sister and her husband passed. I am sorry for your loss, madam." His voice was steady and genuine, a slight accent suggesting he had not grown up in the West. "And what makes you qualified to work a cattle ranch, Mr. Xander?" "I have worked ranches from Texas to Montana these past 8 years. I can handle cattle, mend fences, break horses, and I am fair with carpentry. I can provide references if you would like to write to my previous employers." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out several folded letters, their edges worn from travel. Violet took the letters, scanning them quickly. They were genuine references, praising Kieran's work ethic, honesty, and skill. One was from a ranch in Wyoming, another from a cattle drive outfit in Texas. The dates suggested he moved frequently but stayed employed. "Why leave your last position?" she asked. "The Wyoming ranch was sold to a mining company. The owner paid everyone off and moved back east. I have been traveling for about a month, looking for a place that feels right." He glanced past her at the land, and something in his expression suggested he saw potential where others might see struggle. "I cannot pay much," Violet said bluntly. "There is a bunkhouse that needs some repair, but it is dry and has a stove. Meals come with the job, and I can offer $10 a month to start." It was less than half what most ranch hands earned, and she expected him to refuse. But Kieran simply nodded. "That is fair, considering you are learning to manage a loan. Would you accept 15% of any profit when we sell cattle? That way I have stake in the ranch doing well." The proposal surprised her. It suggested he planned to stay and saw possibility in what she was building. "That seems reasonable. But I should be clear, Mr. Xander. I am raising my sister's 3 children here. This is a family home, not a rough cattle camp. I expect respectful behavior and no drinking on the property." "Yes, madam. I do not drink, and I respect any household I am part of." He met her eyes again, and Violet found herself believing him. "When can you start?" "Right now, if you would like. My horse is tied down by your gate." He gestured toward a sturdy-looking bay gelding waiting patiently in the afternoon sun. "The bunkhouse is around back. It has not been used in over a year, so expect dust and probably some mice. There are cleaning supplies in the barn." Violet felt a weight lift slightly from her shoulders, even as she reminded herself to remain cautious. "I will bring dinner out to you this evening and we can discuss the work schedule then." "I appreciate the opportunity, Mrs. Warren." "Miss Warren," Violet corrected. "I never married. The children are my sister's." Something flickered in Kieran's eyes, but he simply nodded. "Miss Warren." "I will get settled and then start looking over the property if that suits you." After he left, Violet realized her hands were shaking slightly. She had just hired a complete stranger to work on the ranch, to be around the children. Was she being foolish? But the references had been good, and Ruby City's sheriff could verify his story easily enough. She would ride into town tomorrow and check. "Is that man going to work here?" Emma had crept back into the main room, ever curious. "He is, for now. His name is Mr. Xander. Is he nice?" Thomas asked, joining his sister. I believe so, but we will be careful until we are sure. You know the rules. Stay where I can see you when he is around. The children nodded solemnly. They had learned too much about caution in their short lives. Violet finished cleaning up from lunch and settled Sarah down for her afternoon nap, before taking Emma and Thomas with her to check on the chickens and gather eggs. From the chicken coop, she could see Kieran leading his horse toward the bunkhouse, his movements efficient and calm. The horse followed him willingly, a good sign. Animals often sense things people missed. By evening, Violet had prepared a larger dinner than usual, adding extra portions for their new ranch hand. She made a venison stew with vegetables from her garden, along with fresh biscuits and the last of Mrs. Henderson's apple preserves. As the sun began its descent, painting the Arizona sky in shades of orange and pink, she loaded a tray and headed to the bunkhouse. Kieran had been busy. The bunkhouse door stood open, and she could see he had swept it clean and aired it out. His few belongings were neatly arranged on a shelf, and he had already repaired one of the shutters that had been hanging loose. He stepped out as she approached, his face cleaner now and his hair damp as if he had washed at the pump. "Miss Warren, you did not need to bring this out. I could have come to the house. The children are eating, and it is easier this way for now." Violet set the tray on the small table outside the bunkhouse. "I wanted to discuss the immediate needs. The south fence has several broken posts, and there is a section where I suspect cattle might be getting through. We have about 50 head right now, but I have not done a full count in 2 weeks." Kieran nodded, listening intently as he began eating. "I will ride the property line tomorrow, get a full assessment. How is your water situation? The well is getting difficult. It takes longer to draw water each time." "I will look at that too. Sometimes debris gets into the mechanism or the rope needs replacing." He paused, then asked carefully, "Have you had trouble with those men who were here earlier?" So he had seen them. "You were watching the house. I heard the commotion when I was settling my horse. I stayed back, but I wanted to make sure they left without causing problems. They had the look of men who prey on anyone they think cannot fight back. They wanted money for protection from outlaws. I told them we had no need of their services." Violet kept her voice steady, but she appreciated his concern. "If they come back, I can handle it. Men like that usually back down when they realize a property is not undefended." He said it matter-of-factly, not boasting, just stating a truth. They talked for a while longer about the ranch's needs, and Violet found herself relaxing slightly. Kieran asked intelligent questions and offered suggestions without trying to take over or dismiss her own knowledge. When she finally returned to the house, she felt something she had not experienced in months, a small flicker of hope. The next morning, Violet woke before dawn as always. She dressed quickly in her work dress, braided her long dark hair, and started breakfast. By the time the children began stirring, she had porridge cooking and was packing supplies for Kieran to take on his assessment ride. She found him at the barn, already examining their 3 horses. The ranch had once had more, but she had sold 2 after Margaret's death to pay for supplies they desperately needed. "Morning, Miss Warren. These are good horses, well cared for." He was checking the hooves of her sister's mare, a gentle chestnut named Rosie. Margaret loved horses. She always said they deserved the best care we could give them. Violet handed him the packed saddlebag. "There is food and water for the day. A map of the property lines is in there too, though the eastern boundary is disputed. A neighboring rancher claims his property extends further than our deed shows. I will note everything I see, should be back before dark." Kieran saddled Rosie, moving with practiced ease. Before mounting, he turned to Violet. "I noticed you are low on firewood. If you are agreeable, I will chop some when I return. Thank you. I have been meaning to, but there are not enough hours in the day. He smiled then, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his serious face, reaching his eyes. That is why I am here now. To help make those hours go further. After he rode out, Violet threw herself into her own work. She tended the garden, fed the chickens, and spent time with the children, helping Emma with her reading lessons and letting Thomas help gather eggs. Sarah followed her everywhere, chattering in the way 3-year-olds did, mixing real words with sounds only she understood. Around mid-morning, Mrs. Henderson did arrive, bringing not only preserves but also fabric scraps for the children and news from town. She was a widow in her 50s who had taken a kind interest in Violet and the children. "I heard you hired Kieran Xander," Mrs. Henderson said as they sat on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. "He came through town 2 days ago, asking about work. Seemed polite, but you can never be too careful. I plan to check with the sheriff about him. His references looked genuine, but I want to be certain. That is wise, though I will say Mr. Chen spoke well of him. Said he paid for his room at the boarding house in advance and did not cause any trouble." Mrs. Henderson poured tea from the pot Violet had brought out. "How are you managing, dear?" "Really," Violet sighed. "Some days are harder than others. The children are adjusting, but Sarah still looks for her mother sometimes. Emma has nightmares. Thomas tries to be brave and grown up, which breaks my heart because he is only 6. And you took on 3 children and a ranch without hesitation. That is no small thing. What else could I do? Margaret was my sister, my only family. These children are my blood. I cannot imagine abandoning them." Violet watched Emma carefully guiding Thomas through the flower garden she had planted. "But I worry I am not enough. I am not their mother, no matter how hard I try." "Love makes you their mother now, deed or not. They are lucky to have you." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "And perhaps having help with the ranch will ease some of your burden. Perhaps, if he works out and if I can afford to keep him on." They talked a while longer before Mrs. Henderson headed back to town, leaving Violet with her generous gifts and warm encouragement. The day passed in its usual rhythm of work and childcare, and Violet found herself occasionally glancing toward the horizon, wondering what Kieran was finding on his ride. He returned as the sun began setting, just as he had promised. Violet was preparing dinner when she heard Rosie's hoofbeats. She stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, and waited as he dismounted. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Could be worse," Kieran said, though his expression was serious. "The south fence needs significant work. About a quarter-mile of posts need replacing, and the wire is rusted through in places. You are right about cattle getting through. I found tracks suggesting at least 3 or 4 head have wandered off your property." Violet felt her stomach sink. Losing even a few cattle could mean the difference between making it through the year and losing everything. "I will track them tomorrow," Kieran continued. "The trail is still fresh enough to follow. As for the water issue, I pulled up the bucket and found the problem. The support beam is cracked and the pulley is worn almost through. It is dangerous, Miss Warren. If that rope snaps while someone is drawing water, the bucket and chain could seriously injure whoever is standing there. Can you fix it?" "Yes, but it will take time and some materials we will need to get from town. I can make temporary repairs tonight to make it safer, then do a proper job once we have supplies." "Thank you." Violet realized she had been unconsciously holding tension in her shoulders. Having someone to share these problems with, someone who knew how to solve them, was a relief she had not expected to feel so intensely. "There is one more thing." Kieran pulled out a worn piece of paper with sketched notes and markings. "The disputed boundary with your neighbor." Based on the survey markers I found, your deed is accurate. He is trying to claim land that is legally yours. It is good grazing land too, which explains why he wants it. That would be Mr. Thornton. He made an offer to buy the ranch after Margaret died, well below its value. When I refused, he started claiming the boundary was wrong. Violet felt anger rise in her chest. I cannot afford a lawyer to fight him properly. You might not need one. If the survey markers are still in place and your deed is registered properly at the county office, the law is on your side. But he is probably counting on you not having the resources or knowledge to fight back. Kieran's voice held an edge of anger on her behalf. I will worry about Mr. Thornton later. Right now, the fence and the well are more important. They discussed the work schedule and the supplies needed from town. Violet was impressed by how thoroughly Kieran had assessed everything and how clearly he could explain what needed doing. When she finally went back inside to serve dinner to the children, she realized she felt lighter than she had in months. Over the next week, Kieran proved himself invaluable. He worked from dawn until dusk, repairing the well, mending fences, and tracking down the missing cattle. He found 2 of them on Thornton's land and calmly retrieved them, though he returned with a warning that Thornton had not been pleased. He said some things I would not repeat in front of you, Miss Warren. But he is aware now that you have help, and I made it clear his games would not continue unchallenged. Kieran was chopping firewood as they talked, his axe swinging with steady precision. I hope that does not mean trouble for you. Men like Thornton are used to intimidating people weaker than themselves. He will bluster and complain, but he knows the law favors you if it comes to a real dispute. He paused to wipe sweat from his forehead. Though I will keep an eye out. Sometimes men like that get vindictive when they are challenged. The children had gradually grown comfortable with Kieran's presence. Thomas was fascinated by everything the cowboy did, often trailing after him when chores allowed, asking endless questions that Kieran answered patiently. Emma was more reserved, but had started greeting him politely each morning. Even little Sarah would wave at him from the safety of Violet's arms. One evening, as Violet brought dinner out to Kieran, she found Thomas sitting on the bunkhouse steps, watching raptly as Kieran repaired a saddle. Thomas, you are supposed to stay by the house, Violet said, though her tone was more concerned than angry. I am sorry, Aunt Violet. I just wanted to watch Mr. Xander work. He said it was all right if I sat here. Thomas looked between them anxiously. It is my fault, Miss Warren. He asked permission, and I should have checked with you first. Kieran set down his tools. I was just showing him how saddle stitching works. Violet looked at her nephew's eager face and felt her resolve soften. The boy needed male influence in his life, someone to teach him things she could not. But she also needed to keep the children safe, and she still did not fully know Kieran. Next time, please come ask me first, Thomas. I need to know where you are. Yes, madam. Thomas stood reluctantly, clearly disappointed. Though, Violet added, surprising herself, if Mr. Xander is agreeable, perhaps you could spend a little time in the evenings learning from him. With my permission first. Thomas's face lit up, and even Kieran looked pleased. I would be happy to teach him, Miss Warren. My father taught me leatherwork when I was about his age. It is a useful skill. After that evening, a new routine developed. Once dinner was finished and Sarah was in bed, Thomas would spend a short while with Kieran, learning basic skills while Violet and Emma cleaned up or worked on Emma's lessons. Violet always kept them in sight, but she began to trust that Kieran was genuine in his kindness toward the boy. 2 weeks after Kieran's arrival, Violet rode into Ruby City to purchase supplies and check on their account at the general store. She also made a point of visiting Sheriff Morrison, a fair-minded man in his 40s who had been kind to her since Margaret's death. "Miss Warren, good to see you. I trust everything is well at the ranch." The sheriff stood when she entered his office, gesturing to a chair. "Well enough, thank you. I actually came to ask about someone. I hired a ranch hand recently, Kieran Xander. He had references, but I wanted to verify his story if possible." Sheriff Morrison nodded approvingly. "Smart to check. I have known Kieran for about 2 years now. He worked at the Broken Arrow Ranch north of here for a season. Good man, honest worker. The owner, Jack Morrison, he is my cousin, spoke highly of him when Kieran moved on. So you can vouch for his character, as much as anyone can vouch for another person. I know he has never been in trouble with the law, pays his debts, and treats people fairly. Jack said he left the Broken Arrow on good terms when he got an offer for more pay up in Wyoming. That ranch being sold is true too. Mining company bought up half the county up there." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "I heard about the trouble with those protection men. Has Kieran been helpful with that situation? They have not returned since he arrived." "Good. Those men are troublemakers, but they are smart enough to avoid real fights. Knowing you have help out there will keep them away." He paused. "How are those children doing? Emma and Thomas and the little one, growing every day. Emma is learning to read well and Thomas is curious about everything. Sarah is healthy and happy." Violet smiled, thinking of them. "They still miss their parents terribly, but we are managing. You are a good woman taking them on. Not everyone would have." The sheriff's respect was evident in his voice. Violet finished her business in town feeling reassured about her decision to hire Kieran. She purchased the supplies he had requested for ranch repairs, along with fabric to make new shirts for Thomas, who was growing out of his clothes at an alarming rate. As she loaded everything into the wagon, she noticed several people watching her with curiosity. A single woman running a ranch was still unusual enough to attract attention, though most of Ruby City had been kind to her. The ride back to the ranch took about an hour, and Violet used the time to think about how much her life had changed in just 18 months. She had gone from teaching other people's children to raising her sisters, from living in a small rented room to managing a ranch. Some days the responsibility felt crushing, but increasingly she found satisfaction in the work and the life she was building for her small family. When she arrived home, she found Emma on the porch with her doll and Sarah napping inside, but Thomas and Kieran were nowhere in sight. A flutter of concern moved through her chest until she spotted them near the barn. Kieran was teaching Thomas how to properly curry a horse, guiding the boy's small hands with patience. Gentle strokes, following the direction the hair grows. "That is right. You are doing well," Kieran was saying as Violet approached. Thomas beamed at the praise, carefully brushing Rosie's flank. When he noticed Violet, he called out excitedly, "Aunt Violet, Mr. Xander is teaching me how to take care of horses properly. He says if I learn well, maybe I can help with the feeding too." "That is wonderful, Thomas, but you remember you cannot be around the horses without adult supervision." "I know. Mr. Xander already explained that. He said horses are big and can hurt people by accident if we are not careful." Thomas returned his attention to his work, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Kieran walked over to help Violet with the supplies. "He is a good student, eager to learn. I hope you do not mind me teaching him." "The sheriff vouched for you today," Violet said quietly as they carried bags into the barn. "He said you are trustworthy." "I am glad he did. I know it is not easy trusting a stranger around your family." Kieran set down a bag of grain. "For what it is worth, Miss Warren, I respect what you are doing here. Those children are lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one. They give me purpose." Violet found herself meeting his eyes, struck again by their unusual green color. "I am grateful for your help, Mr. Xander, truly. The ranch would be failing without it. It is Kieran, please. Mr. Xander makes me feel like my father," he smiled slightly. "And you are welcome. This is good work, meaningful work. I have drifted for years, working one ranch after another, never staying anywhere long. It is nice to feel like I am building something that matters." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that Violet recognized because she had felt it herself. Before Margaret's children had become her responsibility, she had often wondered what her purpose was, teaching the same lessons year after year to children who would forget her as soon as they graduated. "You have family, Kieran?" she asked, surprising herself with the personal question. "Not anymore. My parents died when I was 19, farm accident back in Ohio. I had no siblings, no wife. I sold the farm and headed west, looking for something I could not name. Been looking ever since, I suppose," he shrugged, but she could see the old pain in his eyes. "I am sorry. Losing family is hard, no matter the circumstances. It is, but it teaches you to appreciate what you have when you have it." He looked out toward where Thomas was still carefully grooming the horse. "Those children have been through loss too, but they have you. That makes all the difference." They worked together to unload the wagon, falling into an easy rhythm. Violet found herself noticing small things about Kieran. The way he moved with quiet efficiency, how he always checked to make sure she was not lifting anything too heavy, the gentle tone he used when speaking to the children. He was different from the rough cowboys who drifted through Ruby City, softer in some ways but with an underlying strength that suggested he could handle himself when necessary. That night, after the children were asleep, Violet sat on the porch in the cool evening air. The Arizona night was beautiful, stars scattered across the sky in brilliant profusion. She could hear Kieran moving around in the bunkhouse, settling in for the night. It struck her how much safer she felt knowing he was there, how the weight on her shoulders had eased since he arrived. She thought about the future, about how she would manage the ranch long term. The money from selling cattle in the fall might be enough to pay Kieran properly and stock up for winter. If they could expand the herd over the next few years, they might even prosper. But it all depended on nothing going wrong, no disasters or illnesses or accidents. "Please, Margaret," she whispered to the night sky, speaking to her dead sister. "Give me the strength to do this right. Give me wisdom to raise your babies well." The stars offered no answers, but Violet felt a sense of peace anyway. She was doing her best, and for now that had to be enough. The weeks rolled into a month, and then 6 weeks. Spring moved toward summer, bringing heat that baked the Arizona landscape. Kieran continued to prove his worth, tackling every job that needed doing. He repaired the corral fence, fixed the barn door that had been sticking, and even helped Violet plant a larger vegetable garden to reduce their food costs. But more than his practical help, Kieran brought something else to the ranch, a sense of stability and companionship. He had a quiet way about him that put everyone at ease. Emma had started bringing her schoolwork to show him in the evenings, proudly reading aloud from her primer. Sarah would toddle over to him when he came in from work, arms raised, and he would crouch down to her level, asking about her day as seriously as if she were an adult. And Violet found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, when the day's work was done and they would talk about the ranch, or books, or nothing in particular. She learned that Kieran had educated himself through reading, carrying books in his saddlebags, and trading them at general stores as he traveled. She shared stories about her sister and the happy times before the cholera came. One evening, about 2 months after Kieran's arrival, trouble finally found them again. Violet was preparing dinner when she heard horses approaching at speed. She grabbed the rifle instinctively and moved to the window. 3 men were riding toward the house, the same men who had demanded protection months ago. "Emma, take Thomas and Sarah to the back bedroom. Lock the door and do not come out until I say." Violet kept her voice calm but firm. "But Aunt Violet, now, Emma." The children rushed to obey, fear in their eyes. Violet positioned herself by the door, rifle ready, her heart pounding. Where was Kieran? He had been working on the south pasture fence. The men dismounted and approached the porch. Their leader, a scarred man who went by the name Rake, called out, "Miss Warren, we need to have a conversation about your payment situation." "I told you before, I do not need your protection," Violet called back through the closed door. "Well, that is the thing. Some of your cattle wandered onto the road yesterday, caused a bit of a problem. Could have been prevented if you had proper protection helping you manage things." Rake's voice held a threatening edge. "My cattle are all accounted for and properly fenced. You are lying." "Careful, Miss Warren. Calling a man a liar is serious business. Now we can settle this friendly, like if you just pay what is fair. $50 ought to cover it." $50 was a fortune, money she absolutely did not have. "Get off my property." "That is no way to, the lady asked you to leave." Kieran's voice cut through the tension. Violet looked through the window to see him approaching from the barn, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. His whole demeanor had changed. The gentle ranch hand was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who had clearly handled dangerous situations before. Rake turned to face him. "Well, if it is not the hired help, this is between us and Miss Warren." "No, it is not. It is between you and me now. And I am telling you to get back on your horses and ride out." Kieran's voice was steady, almost conversational, which somehow made it more threatening. 3 of us, one of you, might want to reconsider your position, Cowboy. 3 of you, and not one of you has drawn a weapon yet. That tells me you are not actually looking for a fight. You are looking for an easy target. But Miss Warren is not alone anymore, and she is not going to be intimidated by cheap threats. Kieran took a step forward. "Last chance, leave peacefully." For a long moment, nobody moved. Violet held her breath, her finger near the rifle's trigger. Then Rake spat on the ground and mounted his horse. "This is not over." "Yes, it is. If you come back here, I will report you to Sheriff Morrison for harassment and attempted extortion. He has been looking for a reason to run you out of the territory. Do not give him one." Kieran did not move, watching until all 3 men had ridden away. Violet set the rifle down with shaking hands and opened the door. "Thank you. I thought you handled yourself well. But I am glad I heard them coming." Kieran's expression softened as he looked at her. "Are you all right? The children?" "We are fine. Frightened, but fine." Violet suddenly felt the weight of the encounter hit her. Her knees went weak and she sat down heavily on the porch step. Kieran sat beside her, not too close, respecting her space. "I am going to ride into town tomorrow and speak with the sheriff. Men like that need to understand there will be consequences if they keep bothering you. What if they come back while you are gone? They will not. They are cowards. They only approach when they think they have the advantage." He paused. "But if it would make you feel safer, I will wait a day and we can go together. You need to file an official complaint anyway." Violet nodded, then called for the children. They came tumbling out and Sarah immediately climbed into Violet's lap, clinging tight. Emma and Thomas looked pale but composed. "Is the bad man gone?" Thomas asked. "He is, and he will not be back." Kieran spoke with such certainty that even Thomas seemed to believe him. That night, Violet lay awake for a long time, listening to Sarah's soft breathing beside her. The little girl had refused to sleep in her own bed, needing the comfort of her aunt's presence. Violet thought about how Kieran had stood between her family and danger without hesitation, how he had handled the situation with both strength and restraint. She found herself thinking about him more often lately, and not just as a hired hand. She noticed the way he smiled when Thomas ran to greet him in the mornings, the gentleness with which he treated the animals, the intelligence in his eyes when they discussed the ranch's needs. He was becoming important to her in ways that had nothing to do with his work skills. The realization frightened her. She could not afford to develop feelings for someone who might leave as soon as a better opportunity came along. The children needed stability, not another loss. And yet, she could not deny the warmth that spread through her chest when Kieran looked at her with those green eyes, or the way her heart beat faster when their hands accidentally touched while working together. The next day, Violet and Kieran rode into Ruby City together, leaving the children with Mrs. Henderson. The older woman had been happy to help, her eyes twinkling as she watched Violet and Kieran ride off together. At the sheriff's office, they gave a full account of both incidents with Rake and his men. Sheriff Morrison listened carefully, taking notes. "I have been building a case against those three for months. They have been running this protection scheme across half the county, targeting widows and single women mainly. Your testimony could be what I need to arrest them." The sheriff looked satisfied. "I will send a deputy out to your ranch, have him keep an eye on things for the next few weeks until we round those men up." "Thank you, Sheriff. That would ease my mind considerably," Violet said. After leaving the sheriff's office, they went to the general store for supplies. Mr. Chen greeted them warmly. "Miss Warren, Mr. Xander, good to see you both. How is the ranch?" "Improving thanks to Mr. Xander's help," Violet said. "I am glad I pointed him your direction. It is working out well." Mr. Chen began gathering the supplies on Violet's list. "Very well. He has been invaluable." Violet noticed several townspeople watching them as they loaded supplies into the wagon. She knew there would be talk, a young single woman and a cowboy working together without other adults present. In a small town like Ruby City, reputation mattered. But she refused to care. She was doing nothing wrong, and the ranch needed Kieran's help. As they drove back to the ranch, Kieran asked, "Does it bother you, the gossip?" "You noticed?" "Hard not to. Mrs. Fletcher looked like she was about to burst with curiosity when we passed her on the street." He glanced at Violet. "I do not want to cause problems for you." "You are not causing problems. You are solving them. If people want to gossip, let them. They are not the ones trying to raise 3 children and run a ranch alone." But Violet felt heat in her cheeks anyway. "Still, I understand how small towns work. Your reputation matters, especially for the children's sake. If you would prefer, I could take work elsewhere, come back during the day to do the ranch work and leave before evening." "No," Violet said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "No, that is ridiculous. You have done nothing inappropriate, and we need you there, especially with those men potentially causing more trouble. Anyone who wants to question my judgment can answer to me directly." Kieran smiled. "Yes, madam." They rode in companionable silence for a while before Kieran spoke again. "Can I ask you something personal?" "That depends on what it is." "Why did you never marry? You clearly love children, and you are intelligent, capable," and he stopped, seeming to catch himself. "I am sorry, that is too forward." "And," Violet prompted, curious about what he had been about to say. "And you are one of the most remarkable women I have ever met," he finished quietly. Violet felt her breath catch. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, not trusting herself to look at him. "I suppose I never met anyone who made me want to marry. I was content teaching, spending time with Margaret's family. Marriage seemed like it would mean giving up my independence to become someone's property. Not all marriages are like that. Enough of them are. I watched my mother lose herself in my father's shadow. She was bright and creative, but he wanted a wife who kept house and stayed quiet. She withered. Violet surprised herself with her honesty. After she died, I promised myself I would never let that happen to me. That is fair. A marriage should be a partnership, not a prison. Kieran paused. My parents had that kind of partnership. They made decisions together, worked together, respected each other. I always thought if I married, that is what I would want. Did you ever come close to marrying? Violet found herself genuinely curious. Once, when I was younger. A girl in Ohio before my parents died, but she wanted a farmer who would never leave home, and after I lost the farm, I could not settle. We wanted different things. He shrugged. Maybe I was not ready then. Or maybe she was not the right person. Do you still think about settling somewhere permanently, more and more lately? He did look at her then, and Violet felt the weight of his gaze. Especially since coming to your ranch. There is something about the place, about the work. It feels important. Violet knew he meant more than just the physical labor, but she was not ready to acknowledge it. Not yet. The children have certainly taken to you. Thomas talks about you constantly. He is a good boy. They all are. You are doing an excellent job with them, Violet. It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his voice sent a shiver through her. She should correct him, insist on Miss Warren, but she found she did not want to. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you, Kieran." They picked up the children from Mrs. Henderson, who reported they had been well behaved and helpful. Sarah had fallen asleep on the older woman's sofa, and Kieran gently lifted the little girl into his arms to carry her to the wagon. She stirred slightly, then settled against his shoulder with complete trust. "That child has decided you are family," Mrs. Henderson observed with a knowing smile. "I am honored," Kieran said simply, and Violet could tell he meant it. The ride home was louder with the children awake, Thomas chattering about everything he had done at Mrs. Henderson's house and Emma quietly telling Violet about a book the older woman had let her read. Sarah woke up cranky and wanted her aunt, so Kieran drove the wagon while Violet soothed the fussy toddler. It struck Violet how natural this felt, like they were a real family. The thought both warmed and terrified her. She could not let herself get too comfortable, too dependent on Kieran's presence. He had said he wanted to settle, but people said many things. She needed to protect herself and the children from potential heartbreak. But as the days continued to pass, protecting her heart became increasingly difficult. Kieran was simply too good, too kind, too present in their lives. He helped Emma build a dollhouse from scrap wood, worked with Thomas on his letters in the evenings, and somehow always knew when Violet needed help before she had to ask. One particularly hot afternoon, about 3 months after Kieran's arrival, Violet was struggling to hang laundry in the blazing sun while watching the children. Sarah kept trying to grab the wet clothes. Thomas was supposed to be feeding chickens but had gotten distracted by a grasshopper, and Emma was crying because she had torn her only good dress. "I can mend it," Violet said for the 3rd time, her patience wearing thin from the heat and exhaustion. "Emma, please stop crying." "But it was my favorite," Emma wailed. Kieran appeared from the barn, took in the situation at a glance, and smoothly intervened. "Thomas, I need your help checking on that hen that has been acting strange. Can you assist me?" He swept the boy away before Thomas could get into more trouble. Then he turned to Emma. "I have a thought about your dress. What if we added some pretty trim where the tear is? Make it look like it was designed that way." Emma's tears slowed. "Really? Sure. My mother used to do that. Made mistakes into decorations." He looked at Violet. "If your aunt has some ribbon or lace." "I have some things in my sewing basket," Violet said gratefully. Kieran took Emma inside to sort through the sewing supplies while Violet finished the laundry with only Sarah to manage, which felt like a vacation in comparison. By the time she came inside, Kieran and Emma had designed an elaborate plan for fixing the dress, and Emma was smiling again. "Thank you," Violet mouthed to him over Emma's head. "That is what I am here for," he responded, but his eyes said more than his words. That evening, after the children were in bed, Violet found Kieran sitting on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. She brought out 2 cups of coffee and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You have been a blessing to this family," she said quietly. "I do not know how to thank you properly. You have given me a place to belong. That is thanks enough." He accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Do you really feel like you belong here?" Violet asked, her heart beating faster. "More than I have felt anywhere in a very long time." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his eyes seemed to glow. "This is the first place in years that has felt like home. The children, the work, the land. It feels right." "And me," Violet whispered, suddenly brave. "Do I feel right?" Kieran set down his coffee cup carefully. "Violet, you feel like everything I have been looking for without knowing I was looking. You are strong and kind and devoted to your family. You face every challenge with courage. You are remarkable. I am just doing what needs to be done." "No, you are doing far more than that. You took on 3 orphan children without hesitation. You are fighting to keep your ranch against men who would take advantage of you. You are learning skills you never imagined needing, and you are doing it all with grace." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her hand. "I have been trying not to overstep, trying to respect the boundaries between employer and employee. But I need you to know how much I admire you, how much I care about what happens to you and the children." Violet turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. His hand was calloused from work but warm and steady. "I care about you too. More than I should, probably. I keep telling myself not to depend on you, not to let the children get too attached because you might leave. But the truth is we are already attached, all of us. I am not going anywhere, Violet, not unless you send me away." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "I know it has only been a few months, but when something is right, you feel it, and this is right." They sat together in the warm night air, hands clasped, not quite ready to name what was growing between them, but no longer denying it either. Violet felt a sense of peace settle over her, different from the resignation she had felt before Kieran arrived. This was hope, real and solid. "Tell me about your dreams," she said. "What do you want from life?" Kieran thought for a moment. "I want a home, a real one, not just a place to sleep between jobs. I want work that matters, that builds something lasting. I want a family, people who depend on me and who I can depend on. I want to wake up in the same place for years, watch children grow, maybe grow old with someone who loves the life we have built together." He paused. "What about you? What do you dream about lately?" "I dream about the ranch thriving, the children growing up happy and healthy. I dream about not having to struggle so hard just to survive." Violet leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that felt both daring and natural. "I dream about not being alone anymore." "You are not alone. Not anymore." They stayed there until the night grew cool and Violet reluctantly pulled away. "I should go in. Sarah sometimes wakes in the night." Kieran stood and helped her up, his hands gentle on her arms. For a moment they stood very close and Violet thought he might kiss her. She found herself wanting him to, but instead he simply touched her cheek softly. "Good night, Violet. Sleep well." "Good night, Kieran." Inside, Violet checked on the sleeping children, her heart full of emotions she was not quite ready to examine. Everything was changing, had been changing since the day Kieran rode up to her door. She was falling in love with him. There was no point denying it to herself anymore. The question was what to do about it. She had responsibilities, 3 children who needed stability. And while Kieran seemed sincere about staying, how could she be certain? How could she risk the children's hearts, not to mention her own? But as she lay in bed, listening to Sarah's soft breathing, Violet realized that risk was part of life. She had taken a risk hiring Kieran, and it had transformed their situation from desperate to hopeful. Maybe it was time to take another risk, this one with her heart. The next morning brought news that temporarily pushed thoughts of romance aside. A deputy arrived to inform them that Rake and his men had been arrested attempting to extort another ranch. They would face trial in the county seat and were likely to be sent to prison or run out of the territory entirely. "You are safe now, Miss Warren. Those men would not dare come near your property again," the deputy assured her before riding off. The relief Violet felt was immense. One major source of stress had been eliminated. She shared the news with Kieran, who was working on repairing a damaged section of the barn roof. "That is excellent news, one less thing to worry about." He climbed down from the ladder. "Though I will stay alert regardless. Sometimes men like that have friends who hold grudges." "Always vigilant," Violet said with a smile. "It has kept me alive this long." He smiled back, and Violet felt her heart skip. They fell into a new rhythm over the following weeks. Kieran continued his work on the ranch, but the evenings became their time. After the children went to bed, Violet and Kieran would sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his travels, the different places he had seen, the various ranches where he had worked. She shared stories about her childhood with Margaret, the years she had spent teaching, her fears and hopes for the children. Slowly, carefully, they were building something together. Kieran began including himself in their future plans naturally. "When we expand the herd next spring," he would say, "or once the children are older and can help more with chores." Violet found herself responding in kind, talking about we and our instead of I and my. One Saturday, about 4 months after Kieran's arrival, they all took a rare day off to go into town for the summer festival. Ruby City was celebrating the 4th of July with food, games, and music. The children were beside themselves with excitement, especially Thomas, who had never been to a real celebration before. Violet wore her best dress, a deep blue that Margaret had made for her years ago. She had taken extra care with her hair, pinning it up in a style more elaborate than her usual practical braid. When she emerged from the bedroom, Emma clapped her hands. "Aunt Violet, you look beautiful." "Like a princess," Sarah added, though her pronunciation of princess was more like P-wincess. Kieran, waiting by the wagon, seemed to lose his ability to speak for a moment. "You look lovely," he finally managed, his eyes warm. "Thank you." Violet felt her cheeks flush. "You clean up quite nicely yourself." He was wearing a clean shirt and vest, his hair still damp from washing. He looked younger somehow, less weathered, and Violet was struck again by how handsome he was. The ride into town was filled with the children's chatter and excitement. Ruby City had transformed for the celebration, with bunting hanging from buildings and tables set up in the main street. There was a small stage for musicians and speakers, and the smell of roasting meat and baking pies filled the air. They spent the day enjoying the festivities. Kieran won a prize at the shooting contest, which he immediately gave to Emma. Thomas got sticky with candy, and Sarah fell asleep on Violet's shoulder during the mayor's speech. Several townspeople approached them, including Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Chen, treating them almost like a family unit. "The children look happy," Mrs. Henderson observed, watching Thomas and Emma try their hand at a ring toss game. Kieran had given them coins for it and was supervising from nearby. They are adjusting well. Having Kieran's help has made all the difference. Violet shifted Sarah to her other shoulder. He is good with them, good for them. Mrs. Henderson gave Violet a meaningful look. Good for you too, I think. Perhaps, Violet allowed, not quite ready to discuss her feelings publicly. As the afternoon turned to evening, the musicians began playing for dancing. Couples filled the street, and Kieran turned to Violet. "May I have this dance?" Violet glanced at the children. Emma had been enlisted by Mrs. Henderson to help with the pie table, and Thomas was watching the dancers with wide eyes. Sarah was still sleeping, oblivious to everything. "I will watch the little one," Mrs. Henderson offered, smoothly taking Sarah from Violet's arms. "You two enjoy yourselves." Kieran led Violet onto the dance floor, his hand warm on her waist, their other hands clasped. The song was a simple waltz, and they moved together naturally. Violet realized this was the closest they had ever been, and she was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. "I have not danced in years," she admitted. "You are doing wonderfully." Kieran guided her through a turn. "I have not danced much either. Always seemed like it required staying in one place long enough to court someone properly. And now I find myself very interested in staying in one place and courting someone properly." His eyes met hers, and Violet felt her breath catch. "Kieran, I know it has not been long. I know we should probably wait longer before discussing this. But Violet, I am in love with you." The words came out quietly, for her ears only. "I love your strength and your kindness. I love how devoted you are to those children. I love talking with you in the evenings and working beside you during the day. I love the life we are building together." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too. I have been trying to be practical and cautious, but I cannot help it. You have become essential to me, to all of us." Kieran smiled, a brilliant expression that transformed his face. "Then maybe we should stop fighting it. Maybe we should consider making this permanent. Are you asking me to marry you, Kieran Xander?" "Not yet. Not until I can do it properly with a ring and a real proposal." He pulled her slightly closer as they danced. "But I am telling you my intentions. I want to marry you, Violet Warren. I want to help you raise those beautiful children. I want to build our ranch into something amazing. I want to spend my life with you." "That is what I want too," Violet whispered, letting herself lean into him. "I want all of that." They danced through 2 more songs, lost in each other and the moment. Other couples swirled around them, but Violet barely noticed. She felt like she was floating. All the worry and stress of the past months temporarily lifted. When the music finally ended, they reluctantly separated and returned to where Mrs. Henderson was watching the children. The older woman took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "Had a good dance, did you?" "The best," Kieran said, his eyes never leaving Violet's face. They stayed until the fireworks began, Thomas and Emma utterly enthralled by the explosions of color in the night sky. Sarah woke up and clapped at the pretty lights. Standing there with Kieran beside her, and the children happy and safe, Violet felt something she had not felt since Margaret died: complete joy. The ride home was quieter, the children exhausted and dozing in the back of the wagon. Kieran drove while Violet held Sarah, who had fallen back asleep almost immediately. "Thank you for today," Violet said softly. "It was perfect." "The first of many perfect days, I hope." Kieran glanced at her. "I meant what I said, Violet, about my intentions." "I know you did." "And I meant what I said too." She paused, then added, "But we should probably wait a little longer before making it official. The children need time to adjust to the idea, and I want to make sure they are comfortable with such a big change." "Of course. We will take whatever time we need." I am not going anywhere." His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. Over the next month, they began preparing the children for the possibility of Kieran becoming a permanent part of their family. They were careful not to make promises until everything was certain, but they started including Kieran more obviously in family activities. He joined them for meals at the house instead of eating alone in the bunkhouse. They took Sunday walks together as a group. Small changes, but significant ones. Thomas was thrilled, asking multiple times if Kieran staying forever meant he could keep learning about ranch work. Emma was more cautious, but Violet could see the girl warming to the idea. She had been close to her father, and Kieran's gentle presence seemed to fill some of that void without trying to replace Samuel. Sarah, too young to fully understand, simply accepted Kieran as part of their family already. She would toddle to him as readily as to Violet, secure in his affection. One evening, Emma asked to speak with Violet privately. They sat on Emma's bed while Thomas played with his toy horses and Sarah napped. "Aunt Violet, if you marry Mr. Xander, will you stop being our aunt?" Emma's voice was small, worried. "Oh, sweetheart, no. I will always be your aunt, just like I will always love you. Marrying Mr. Xander would not change that." Violet pulled Emma close. "Nothing will ever change how much I love you and your brother and sister. But if you have your own babies, will you still love us the same?" Ah, so that was the real fear. "Emma, love does not run out. If Mr. Xander and I have children someday, I will love them very much. But I will still love you and Thomas and Sarah just as much as I do right now. You three are my children in every way that matters. That will never change." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. "Do you love Mr. Xander?" "I do, very much." "Does that bother you?" "No," Emma said slowly. "I think Mama and Papa would like him. He is kind to us and he makes you smile. You did not smile much for a long time after they died." Violet felt tears sting her eyes. "Your mother would have liked him very much. She always wanted me to be happy." "Then I am glad he is here. But Aunt Violet, can we still call you Aunt Violet? I do not want to call you Mother. That was my mama. You can call me whatever feels right to you." "Aunt Violet is perfect." Violet hugged Emma tight. "Your mother will always be your mother, sweetheart. I am just the person who loves you and takes care of you now." "Okay. Then I think it is good if you marry Mr. Xander." That conversation helped Violet feel more confident about moving forward. She shared it with Kieran that evening, and he listened thoughtfully. "Emma is a smart girl. They are all adjusting better than I dared hope," he said. "Does this mean you are ready for me to propose properly?" Violet laughed. "Are you so impatient then? When you have been looking for home your whole life and finally find it, impatience is natural." He smiled at her. "But I will wait as long as you need." "I do not think I need to wait much longer. The children are comfortable, the ranch is doing well, and I am tired of pretending you are just an employee when you are so much more." Violet took his hand. "So yes, I suppose I am ready for a proper proposal whenever you are ready to give one." Kieran's eyes lit up. "Then give me a few days to arrange something appropriate." True to his word, Kieran disappeared into town 3 days later on a mysterious errand. He returned looking pleased with himself, but would not tell Violet what he had been doing. She tried not to let her curiosity consume her, focusing instead on her regular work and the children. On Sunday, Kieran suggested they take a picnic to the spot by the creek where cottonwood trees provided shade. It was one of the most beautiful places on the ranch, peaceful and cool even in summer heat. Violet agreed, and they loaded the wagon with food and supplies. The children ran ahead once they reached the creek, playing in the shallow water while Violet and Kieran spread out blankets and set out the food. After they ate, Kieran sent the children on a treasure hunt, giving them a list of things to find: a smooth stone, a bird feather, a flower, and other simple items. "That should keep them busy for a little while," he said, watching them scatter with great enthusiasm. "You are very good with them," Violet observed, settling back against a tree trunk. "They make it easy." Kieran moved closer to her, taking her hand. "Violet, I have been thinking about what to say, how to make this moment special enough to match how I feel. But the truth is, nothing I say could fully express what you mean to me." He shifted to kneel in front of her, pulling a small box from his pocket. "You came into my life when I was drifting, without purpose or direction. You and these children gave me reason to stop running. This ranch, this family, you are everything I have been searching for." Kieran opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small blue stone. "It is not much. The jeweler in town said the stone is turquoise, mined here in Arizona. I thought it was fitting, something from the land we are building our life on." "It is beautiful," Violet whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Violet Warren, will you marry me? Will you let me stand beside you as you raise these children? Will you build a life with me, here on this ranch, and let me love you for the rest of my days?" "Yes," Violet said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Kieran, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. Violet felt like her heart might burst with happiness. "I found a smooth stone." Thomas's voice broke the moment, and they pulled apart, laughing. The children came running back, proudly displaying their treasures. Kieran and Violet shared a look, then Kieran called the children to sit with them. "We have something important to tell you all," Violet began, her hand finding Kieran's. "Your Aunt Violet and I are going to get married," Kieran said. "That means I will be part of your family officially. If you are comfortable with it, I would like to help raise you, along with your aunt." Thomas let out a whoop of excitement. "Does that mean you are going to be my papa?" Kieran glanced at Violet, who nodded encouragingly. "If you would like to call me that, I would be honored. But we can also figure out what feels right to all of you." "Can I call you Papa Kieran?" Emma asked shyly. "I would love that," Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah, sensing the joy around her, clapped her hands. "Pa," she attempted, her first time saying the word. They spent the rest of the afternoon by the creek, celebrating and planning. The children had dozens of questions about the wedding, about what would change, about everything. Violet and Kieran answered patiently, reassuring them that the changes would be good ones. As the sun began to set, they packed up and headed home. Violet looked at the ring on her finger, at the man she was going to marry, at the children who were already treating Kieran like family. Her heart was so full she could hardly stand it. "Happy?" Kieran asked, reaching over to take her hand. "Happier than I have been in longer than I can remember," Violet answered honestly. They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Ruby City. Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Chen stood as witnesses, and several townspeople attended. Violet wore a new dress in pale green that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew. Kieran wore a new suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in formal clothes, but what made the day perfect was the children. Emma, carefully holding Sarah, stood beside Violet with a huge smile. Thomas stood with Kieran, proudly holding the rings. They were all there, a family making their union official. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran kissed Violet gently. Then they turned to the children, gathering all three into a group embrace. This was their family now, legally and officially. The celebration at the ranch afterward was small but joyful. Mrs. Henderson and several other friends came bearing food and gifts. They danced in the yard, ate too much cake, and celebrated until the stars came out. That night, After the guests had gone and the children were finally asleep, Violet and Kieran stood on their porch looking out at their land. Kieran's arm was around her waist, and she leaned into his strength. "Mrs. Xander," he said, testing out her new name. "Mr. Xander," she replied with a smile. "How does it feel being married?" "Right. It feels absolutely right." Violet turned to face him. "Thank you for finding us, for staying, for loving all of us. Thank you for letting me stay, for teaching me what home really means." Kieran kissed her forehead, then her lips. "I love you, Violet. I love you too." They stayed there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the Arizona night settle around their home. Violet thought about how much had changed in less than a year. She had gone from alone and struggling to surrounded by love and support. The future still held challenges, she knew that. But they would face those challenges together now, as a family. The first year of marriage brought adjustments and growth. Kieran moved into the house, and they converted the bunkhouse into a workshop where he could repair equipment and tools. The children adapted to having Kieran as a full-time father figure, though Emma occasionally still struggled with guilt over growing close to him. "It is all right to love Papa Kieran," Violet told her during one of these moments. "Your mama and Papa would want you to be happy and to have someone to take care of you. Loving Papa Kieran does not mean you love them any less." The ranch continued to improve under their joint management. They expanded the herd cautiously, sold cattle at good prices in the fall, and started making plans for long-term improvements. Kieran built a larger chicken coop, and they added pigs to their livestock. Slowly but surely, they were building prosperity. But more than the physical improvements, the emotional healing was profound. The children laughed more, played with abandon instead of quiet wariness. Thomas grew bold and adventurous under Kieran's patient guidance. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. Sarah, who barely remembered her birth parents, simply blossomed in the security of their love. 2 years after their marriage, Violet discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and some trepidation. She had wondered how the children would react, particularly Emma with her earlier concerns. She told Kieran first, catching him in the barn one evening. "I have news. We are going to have a baby." Kieran's face went through several expressions: shock, joy, wonder before he swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby, Violet, that is wonderful. Are you feeling well?" "When? I am fine, just a little tired. The baby should come in early spring." Violet smiled at his enthusiasm. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. We are going to have a baby." He kissed her thoroughly, then pulled back. "We need to tell the children. How do you think they will react? Let's find out." They gathered the children after dinner, sitting them down in the main room. At 8 years old, Sarah was old enough to understand now, sitting between her siblings with curious eyes. "Your papa and I have something exciting to tell you," Violet began. "You are going to have a baby brother or sister next spring." There was a moment of silence as the children processed. Then Thomas, now 10, grinned. "Really? A baby? A real baby that will live here with us?" Emma, at 12, looked cautiously pleased. "Yes, a real baby who will be part of our family." Kieran watched their faces carefully. "What do you think about that?" "I think it is wonderful," Thomas declared. "I can teach the baby about horses and cattle." "The baby will be quite small at first," Violet said with amusement. "You will have to wait a few years before teaching riding." "I can help take care of it," Emma offered. "I remember when Sarah was a baby, I helped Mama sometimes." Sarah, nearly 6 now, looked thoughtful. "Will you still love us when the baby comes?" It was the question Violet had been expecting. She pulled Sarah onto her lap. "We will love you just as much as we do right now. Having another baby will not change how much we love you 3. There is always enough love." "That is right," Kieran added. "You three are our children just as much as this baby will be. Nothing will change that." The children seemed satisfied, and their initial caution quickly gave way to excitement. They spent the evening planning for the baby, arguing about names and whether it would be a boy or girl. Watching them, Violet felt profound gratitude for how far they had all come. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Kieran became almost comically protective. He insisted Violet rest more, tried to take over all the heavy chores, and worried constantly. Violet found it endearing even when it was annoying. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one day when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I know, but I cannot help wanting to take care of you." He took the basket anyway. "You do take care of me. You take wonderful care of all of us." Violet stood on her toes to kiss his cheek. "But you need to let me continue living my life. Women have been having babies while managing households forever." "Not my wife and baby," he said stubbornly, but he smiled. As winter turned to spring, Violet grew rounder and the baby's arrival drew near. They had prepared everything, setting up a cradle in their bedroom and washing tiny clothes. Mrs. Henderson came to stay for a few weeks before the due date, ready to help with the birth and the children afterward. The baby decided to arrive on a beautiful April morning. Violet's labor started just after breakfast, and Mrs. Henderson immediately took charge, sending Kieran for the midwife and the children to stay with Mr. Chen's family in town. "But I want to be here when the baby comes," Thomas protested. "You will meet your new brother or sister very soon," Kieran promised, ushering him toward the wagon. "But right now, your aunt needs quiet and space. We will come get you as soon as the baby arrives." The labor was long but not complicated. Mrs. Henderson and the midwife coached Violet through each contraction while Kieran paced outside, occasionally venturing in to hold Violet's hand when she asked for him. As the sun began to set, Violet gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a loud cry and a thick head of dark hair. When the midwife placed him in her arms, Violet felt her heart expand yet again. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Can I come in now?" Kieran called from outside the bedroom. "Come meet your son," Violet called back, her voice tired but joyful. Kieran entered slowly, his face full of wonder as he approached the bed. He looked at the baby with such love that Violet felt tears spring to her eyes. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Violet asked, touching the baby's tiny hand. They had discussed names but had not settled on one. Kieran was quiet for a moment, studying his son's face. "What about Daniel? It was my father's name." "Daniel Xander, I like it." Violet smiled down at the baby. "Welcome to the family, Daniel." They sent word to town, and within an hour the other children came rushing home. Emma, Thomas, and Sarah crowded around the bed, staring in awe at their new brother. "He is so small," Emma breathed. "You were all that small once," Mrs. Henderson said from the doorway. "Hard to believe, looking at you now." "Can I hold him?" Thomas asked. Under Violet's supervision, each child got a turn carefully holding baby Daniel. Sarah, the youngest before now, seemed particularly taken with the baby. "He is perfect," she declared. "Yes, he is," Violet agreed. "You all are." The weeks after Daniel's birth were chaotic but joyful. Kieran proved to be a devoted father, walking the baby when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, and gazing at his son with constant wonder. The older children adjusted to having a baby in the house, though Thomas complained about the crying at night. "You cried plenty when you were a baby," Violet reminded him. "I did not," Thomas said indignantly. "You did," Emma confirmed. "I remember, Mama said you had powerful lungs." As spring turned to summer, life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to thrive, the children grew, and baby Daniel became more alert and interactive. Violet watched her family with deep contentment. This was what Margaret would have wanted, she thought often. Her children safe and loved. Growing up on the land, their parents had worked so hard to establish. One evening, when Daniel was about 3 months old, Violet stood on the porch with the baby in her arms while Kieran worked with Thomas on his riding. Emma was reading in the shade and Sarah was picking wildflowers. The Arizona sunset painted everything gold and orange. Beautiful, is it not? Mrs. Henderson had arrived for a visit and stood beside Violet. You have built something wonderful here. We have, Violet agreed. Kieran and I together with the children. It is not what I imagined my life would be, but it is better than anything I could have dreamed. Your sister would be proud of you and happy that her children are so loved. I hope so. I try every day to honor her memory by giving them the best life I can. You are doing more than that. You are thriving, Mrs. Henderson smiled. Not many women could have done what you did, taking on 3 children and a ranch alone, and then having the wisdom to accept help when it came along. Accepting Kieran's help was the smartest thing I have ever done, Violet said, watching her husband guide Thomas through a turn on horseback. He has given me everything. That night, after the children were asleep and Daniel had been fed and settled in his cradle, Violet and Kieran sat on their bed talking quietly. You ever miss your old life? Violet asked, curious. The freedom to travel, no responsibilities, not even for a moment. This is everything I wanted and more. Kieran took her hand. I love our life, Violet. The ranch, the children, you. Waking up every day knowing this is where I belong, that these people are mine to love and protect. It is worth more than all the freedom in the world. I love you so much, Violet whispered. I love you too. Always. The years continued to pass, marked by the growth of children and the expansion of the ranch. Thomas grew into a capable young man, taking on more responsibility with the cattle. Emma discovered a talent for keeping books and managing finances, helping Violet track expenses and income. Sarah learned to read voraciously, often found with her nose in a book. And Daniel, he was the baby who brought joy to everyone, toddling after his older siblings and charming everyone he met. When Daniel was 3, Violet became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt different, harder. She was tired more often and Kieran worried constantly. Maybe we should get a doctor, he said one evening when Violet was resting. The midwife says everything is normal. Some pregnancies are just more difficult. Violet took his hand. I am fine, Kieran. Stop worrying so much. I cannot help it. You and the baby are precious to me. We are both fine. And you have 4 other children to focus your attention on. She smiled at him. They need you too. The pregnancy continued through the summer and into fall. In November, on a cool evening, Violet went into labor. This time it was faster, and by midnight they had a daughter. She came into the world quietly, observing her surroundings with dark blue eyes before letting out a single cry. She is perfect, Kieran breathed, holding his daughter for the first time. What about Lily? Violet suggested. For her name, Lily Xander. Yes, perfect. Kieran looked at Violet with such love that she felt tears on her cheeks. You have given me everything, Violet, everything that matters. The children were thrilled with baby Lily. Daniel, now old enough to be gentle, loved having a baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle, singing songs he made up and making her smile. The older children doted on her as well, each taking turns helping with her care. Life continued its steady forward motion. The ranch prospered year after year. They added more land, built a larger barn, and established a reputation for quality cattle. Kieran became known throughout the territory as an honest rancher and skilled horseman. Violet earned respect as a capable businesswoman who could negotiate prices and manage accounts with skill. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, eventually marrying a schoolteacher who came to Ruby City when she was 19. Thomas, at 17, was already being courted by several young women in town, though he insisted he was too busy learning the ranching business to think about marriage. Sarah, at 13, was torn between her love of reading and her fascination with horses. Daniel and Lily grew up surrounded by love, never knowing the hardship their older siblings had experienced. They were confident, happy children who took for granted that they were wanted and cherished. One evening, 15 years after Violet and Kieran's marriage, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The older children were all involved in their own activities, and the younger ones were playing in the yard. "Can you believe it has been 15 years?" Violet asked, leaning against Kieran's shoulder. "It feels like both forever and no time at all," Kieran said. "I look at everything we have built and I am amazed. We have been blessed." Violet watched Daniel teaching Lily how to skip stones in the water trough. 5 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, and each other. What more could we ask for? Nothing. This is everything. Kieran kissed the top of her head. "Though I have been thinking. Thomas is almost ready to manage more of the daily operations. What would you think about taking that trip we have always talked about? Visit San Francisco, maybe see the ocean, and leave the ranch. Not leave, just take a break. Emma and her husband could stay here with the children. It would just be a few weeks." Kieran smiled at her. "We have worked hard for 15 years. Maybe it is time for a little adventure, just the two of us." The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. Violet had not left the ranch for more than a day or two since Margaret's death. Could she really leave, even for a short time? But looking at Kieran's hopeful face, thinking about the adventure they might have together, she found herself nodding. "All right, let's do it. Let's have an adventure." They made the trip the following spring, leaving the ranch in the capable hands of their children. The journey to San Francisco was long but wonderful. They saw sights Violet had only read about in books, met interesting people, and experienced the freedom of being just a couple instead of parents and ranchers. Standing on the beach, watching the Pacific Ocean roll in, Violet felt profound gratitude. This life, this man, this family, it was all more than she had ever imagined having. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how Margaret and Samuel's deaths could have destroyed me, how I could have given up, let the county take the children, sold the ranch. But instead, that tragedy led to all of this." Violet turned in his arms. "It led to you. I will be grateful forever that you were brave enough to keep fighting, to hire a strange cowboy who showed up at your door, to let yourself fall in love." Kieran kissed her softly. "You gave me everything, Violet. We gave each other everything." They returned home to Ruby City 3 weeks later, refreshed and even more appreciative of their life. The children mobbed them at the door, even the older ones, all talking at once about everything that had happened while they were gone. That night, lying in their own bed with Kieran's arm around her, Violet thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the terrified young woman facing the prospect of raising her sister's children alone to the confident rancher and mother she had become. The difference was love, the love of her children, and most especially the love of the cowboy who had offered to help her and then stayed forever. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Kieran responded, his voice sleepy and content. "Always." Outside, the Arizona night was peaceful. Cattle lowed softly in the distance. A coyote howled somewhere on the prairie. The house was full of sleeping children, safe and loved. And Violet, once so alone, was surrounded by family. It was not the life she had planned. It was better, so much better. The years continued their steady march forward. Thomas eventually married a woman from a neighboring ranch, and together they established their own small spread nearby, though Thomas remained heavily involved in the family ranch operations. Emma and her husband welcomed 3 children, and Violet reveled in her role as grandmother. Sarah surprised everyone by becoming a teacher like Violet had once been, opening a small school on the ranch for the children of the families who worked there. She never married, saying she was content with her books and her students, and Violet understood. Not everyone needed a spouse to feel complete. Daniel grew into a handsome young man with his father's green eyes and his mother's determination. At 18, he was already talking about expanding the ranch's operations, full of ideas and energy. Lily, at 15, was equally driven but in different directions. She wanted to learn everything about breeding horses, convinced the ranch's future lay in that direction. Kieran and Violet, now in their 50s, began to step back gradually from the day-to-day operations. They had trained their children well, and Thomas, Daniel, and even Lily were more than capable of managing most things. This gave Violet and Kieran time to simply enjoy their life together. They took walks in the evenings, sat on the porch watching grandchildren play, and talked about everything and nothing. The deep love that had developed between them only grew stronger with time. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, and still found joy in each other's company. One evening, sitting on their favorite spot on the porch, Kieran said, "Do you have any regrets looking back?" Violet considered the question carefully. "I regret that Margaret and Samuel died so young, that the children had to grow up without their birth parents. I regret the struggle of those early months, the fear and uncertainty. But the outcome? No, I have no regrets about where we ended up. I used to regret all the years I spent drifting, looking for something I could not name, but I think I had to walk that road to end up here with you." Kieran took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. "Every choice I made, even the mistakes, led me to your door that day." "I am glad you knocked," Violet said softly. "I am glad you let me help." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. Ruby City was growing, more families arriving all the time, but their ranch remained a constant, a piece of the Old West preserved through hard work and love. Aunt Violet, Papa Kieran, Emma's oldest daughter, came running up, blonde braids flying. "Mama says dinner is ready." "We are coming, sweetheart." Violet stood, her movements slightly stiffer than they once were, and Kieran took her arm with automatic courtesy. Inside, the big house they had expanded over the years was full of family. 3 generations gathered around the extended table, passing food and sharing stories. Thomas and his wife with their 2 children, Emma and her family, Sarah, always nearby even without a family of her own, Daniel and Lily, both still living at home. This was what Violet and Kieran had built. Not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of love. Children who had been orphaned were now thriving adults. A man who had been drifting had found his anchor, and a woman who had been alone had created a family. As Violet looked around the table at all the faces she loved, she sent up a silent thank you to her sister. Margaret's death had been a tragedy, but from that tragedy had come all of this love, this family, this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. "What are you smiling about?" Kieran whispered, leaning close. "Everything," Violet whispered back. "Absolutely everything." After dinner, as the family dispersed to various evening activities, Violet found herself in the room she still thought of as the children's room, though Emma and Thomas had long since moved out. It had been repurposed as a guest room, but traces of their childhood remained, marks on the wall measuring their heights, a few toys stored in a trunk, a sampler Emma had embroidered. "Memories?" Kieran asked, joining her. "So many memories. I can still see them as they were that first day you arrived, Emma watching from the doorway, Thomas trying to be brave, Sarah just a toddler." Violet smiled. "They have grown into such wonderful people. You made them wonderful. Your love, your sacrifice, your determination to give them a good life despite everything, that is what made the difference." Kieran wrapped his arms around her. "I just helped. You did more than help. You gave them a father, gave me a partner, gave all of us a future." Violet turned to face him. "We built this together, Kieran, all of it. Together," he agreed. "Always together." As they walked back to their bedroom, Violet reflected on the journey they had taken. From that first day when a dusty cowboy had appeared at her door offering help, through courtship and marriage, through the birth of their own children and the raising of Margaret's, through all the challenges and triumphs that had filled their years, it had not always been easy. There had been lean years when they worried about money, illnesses that frightened them, and the normal struggles of raising children and running a business. But they had faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. Now, in what Violet thought of as the golden years of their life, they could finally rest in the security of what they had built. The ranch was thriving under the management of the next generation. The children they had raised were good people making their own way in the world. And their love, the foundation of it all, remained strong and true. That night, lying in bed with Kieran beside her, Violet felt complete peace. She had lived a full life, loved deeply, and created something lasting. Whatever the future held, she would face it with Kieran at her side and their family around them. "Good night, my love," Kieran murmured, already half asleep. "Good night," Violet whispered back. Outside, the Arizona night wrapped around their home like a blanket. The ranch settled into quiet, cattle and horses resting, the land peaceful under a canopy of stars. Inside, a family slept, safe and loved, the product of one woman's courage and one man's willingness to help. It was everything. And it was enough. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, each bringing its own rhythm to the ranch. Spring with calving and planting, summer with its fierce heat and hard work, autumn with cattle sales and harvest, winter with its quieter pace and time for repairs. Violet and Kieran moved through the years with contentment, their love deepening into something so fundamental it was like breathing. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, welcomed new grandchildren as Thomas and Emma's families continued to grow. They mourned the passing of old friends like Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Chen, the people who had been part of their journey. They adapted to changes in Ruby City as the Wild West gradually became less wild, civilization taking firmer root. Daniel eventually married a sweet young woman from town, bringing her to the ranch to live. Together, they took over primary management of the cattle operation, implementing new ideas while respecting the foundation Kieran and Violet had built. Lily, true to her passion, developed a horse breeding program that became renowned throughout the territory. Sarah remained devoted to teaching, her small school growing into a larger operation as more families settled in the area. She became known as the best teacher in the county, patient and creative, beloved by her students. Though she never married, her life was full of purpose and love. Emma and her family stayed close, visiting often and helping with major ranch projects. Her children grew up knowing their Aunt Violet's story, understanding the sacrifice and love that had built their extended family. They were taught to value courage, compassion, and the importance of helping those in need. As Violet moved into her 60s, she began to slow down more noticeably. Her joints ached on cold mornings and she tired more easily, but her mind remained sharp and her heart stayed full. Kieran, ever devoted, adjusted his pace to match hers, content to spend their days in quiet companionship. One spring morning, 25 years after they had married, Violet and Kieran took a walk around the ranch. It had become their tradition, a way to see everything that had been accomplished and to remember how far they had come. "You remember that first day?" Violet asked as they stopped near the creek where Kieran had proposed. "When you showed up asking for work?" "I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever seen, standing there with a rifle and 3 scared children depending on you." Kieran smiled at the memory. "I remember hoping you would give me a chance. I am so glad I did. You changed everything, Kieran. You gave us the future I had been too afraid to hope for. We gave it to each other, and to the children." Kieran gestured toward the house, where smoke rose from the chimney and the sounds of family drifted on the breeze. "Look at what we have built, not just buildings and cattle, but a legacy. Those children you saved went on to create families of their own. Our children are doing the same. The love we have given will echo through generations." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. He was right. They had created something that would outlast them, something beautiful and enduring. Margaret's children had not just survived, they had thrived, and the family continued to grow, spreading love and stability outward in ever-widening circles. "I love you, Kieran Xander. Thank you for being exactly who you are, for loving me and our family so completely. I love you, Violet Xander. You made my life worth living. Everything I am, everything I have accomplished, is because you let me stand beside you." They kissed, a sweet, gentle kiss that held the depth of 25 years of partnership and love. Then, arm in arm, they walked back toward the house, toward their family, toward home. The years continued their passage as they always do. Violet and Kieran aged gracefully, surrounded by love and accomplishment. They saw more grandchildren born, eventually even a few great-grandchildren. They watched the ranch continue to thrive under the capable management of Daniel and Lily, with input from Thomas. Emma's children grew into fine adults, always crediting their Aunt Violet with teaching them the importance of family. Sarah's students went on to accomplish great things, many of them returning to tell her how she had changed their lives. The ripples of love and courage that Violet had started when she chose to raise her sister's children spread far and wide. When Violet was 70 years old, she sat in her rocking chair on the porch, a quilt wrapped around her shoulders against the autumn chill. Kieran sat beside her in his own chair, their hands clasped between them. Around them, the ranch hummed with activity, grandchildren playing, adults working, the eternal rhythm of life continuing. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked, as he had asked 1,000 times over the years. "I am happy," Violet confirmed, as she always did. "I am so very happy," and she was. Looking back over her life, Violet saw a journey that had begun in tragedy but transformed into triumph. She had lost her sister but gained a family. She had faced overwhelming challenges but emerged stronger. She had risked her heart on a dusty cowboy and been rewarded with a love that had sustained her through everything. The children she had raised as her own had become wonderful adults, creating their own families and spreading the values she and Kieran had instilled. The ranch they had built together stood strong, a testament to hard work and partnership. And their love, tested by time and trials, remained as steady and true as the Arizona sun. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and golds, Violet leaned her head on Kieran's shoulder. He squeezed her hand gently, and no words were needed. They had said everything that mattered over the years, built everything worth building, loved everyone worth loving. This was their legacy. A family built on love, A ranch built on partnership, and a love story that had begun with a simple offer of help and blossomed into a lifetime of devotion. From the scared young woman facing an uncertain future to the matriarch of a thriving family, Violet had traveled a remarkable journey. And every step of that journey had been better because Kieran walked beside her. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Violet smiled. She had no regrets, no wishes for a different life. This life, with all its challenges and triumphs, with its tragedies and joys, had been exactly right. She had been raising her sister's children alone, and the cowboy had said, "Let me help you." That simple moment had changed everything. And in the end, they had built something beautiful. Together. Always together. The story of Violet and Kieran became part of the family lore, told and retold to each new generation. How Aunt Violet had taken in her sister's orphan children against all odds. How Kieran had appeared like a blessing when they needed help most. How their love had transformed struggle into success, loss into gain, fear into hope. When Violet passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, surrounded by her family, the entire community mourned. She had been a pillar of Ruby City, a woman who had shown what courage and love could accomplish. Kieran held her hand until the end, and in her final moments, Violet saw Margaret waiting for her, smiling with approval at everything her sister had done. Kieran lived another 5 years after Violet's death, surrounded by the family they had built together. He never remarried, saying his heart belonged to Violet always. When his time came, he passed quietly in his sleep, and the family liked to imagine him reunited with his beloved wife. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large oak tree they had planted together decades earlier. Their shared headstone read, "Kieran and Violet Xander. Together they built a legacy of love." The ranch continued under the management of their children and grandchildren, thriving for generations. The story of how it all began with a woman raising her sister's children alone, and a cowboy offering help, was never forgotten. It became a reminder of the power of courage, compassion, and love to transform lives and build futures. Emma, Thomas, and Sarah, the orphan children who had been raised with such devotion, lived long lives filled with love and purpose. They never forgot the sacrifice their Aunt Violet had made or the father figure Kieran had become. They passed those values down to their own children, creating a family tree rooted in love and reaching toward the future with strength. Daniel and Lily, born into the security their parents had created, honored their legacy by living with integrity and kindness. They taught their own children about the cowboy and the courageous woman who had built something beautiful from tragedy. Years turned into decades, and the Arizona territory changed dramatically. But the Xander Ranch remained, a piece of history and a testament to what love could accomplish. Visitors would sometimes come, drawn by the story, and family members would share the tale with pride. It was a story about loss and love, about courage in the face of overwhelming odds, about partnership and family. It was about a woman who refused to give up and a man who offered help at exactly the right moment. It was about 3 frightened children who found safety and love, and about 2 more children born into security and happiness. But most of all, it was a love story. A beautiful, enduring love story set against the backdrop of the Wild West, where Violet Warren met Kieran Xander, and together they built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. She had been raising her sister's children alone. The cowboy had said, "Let me help you." And from that simple beginning, a family was born, a ranch was built, and a love story unfolded that would be remembered for generations. It was a happy ending, the kind where love triumphs and family endures. It was exactly the ending Violet and Kieran deserved, and exactly the legacy they hoped to leave behind. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows across the Arizona prairie and the sun sets in brilliant colors, some say you can still feel their presence on the ranch. They built together, the woman who had the courage to try and the cowboy who had the wisdom to help, forever bound together by love that transcended time itself. Their story was complete, their legacy secure, their love eternal. And that truly was the happiest ending of all.